Welcome to the Scarlet, Blue, and You podcast, the podcast for HLGU alumni and friends. I am your host, Lauren Youse, the Alumni Director here at Hannibal-LaGrange University. And today I am very honored to welcome Dr. Joseph Garner, HLGU's Vice President of Academic Administration, Dean of Faculty, as well as Assistant Professor of Christian Studies and History.
Yes.
Big title.
Unfortunately, they don't pay me by the letters in my title. So
we'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll work on that. That's right.
So Dr. Garner recently wrote a very scholarly paper that was published and selected for presentation at a national conference this last fall. And we're looking forward to hearing all about the research that goes into your work, what led you to this topic,
Sure,
and how scholarship like this continues to strengthen the academic mission of HLGU. So welcome, Dr. Garner.
Thank you so much for having me. So, I mean, very scholarly is probably strong, but
you presented it in front of a room of people in Boston.
That's true.
That sounds pretty scholarly.
Well, you know, I try. So, let me just give you a little background. So, basically, this paper was presented at the annual meeting for the Evangelical Theological Society. So, short for that is ETS.
I mean, come on, it's a society.
It's right. It's a society.
You sound very scholarly right now.
Sure. So basically, ETS is a group of, it's in the name, evangelical scholars, and we gather together once a year in an annual meeting, usually in a different city. This past year, it was in Boston, which was a lot of fun.
Boston in the fall. For our VeggieTale fans.
I can't sing the song anymore, which is a little sad because now I have been to Boston in the fall, but yeah, so think of it. So we gather together and basically spend 3 days delivering papers. And so I think this last year there was just over 3,000 people attended. So we're talking Bible professors, theology professors, church history professors from Christian colleges, seminaries, all across the country, some even across the world. We had some folks there from Australia, from the UK, from Europe, even the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Africa. So it really is an international conference in a lot of ways, though, you know, the meetings are primarily here in the United States. And but also pastors as well. It's not really limited to just kind of, academic professionals, whatever that means. And so it's ETS has a pretty short and sweet confessional statement. So to be a member of the Evangelical Theological Society, you essentially have to believe in what's called the inerrancy of Scripture. Essentially just means that the Bible is true and real and trustworthy. That's always helpful. And it's a good start. And basically be a Trinitarian, believe in the Trinity. Okay. I would say that means be a Christian. And so if you believe those two things, you can sign up to be in the club, as it were.
The society.
And so exactly. So basically it's made up of all sorts of Christian denominations. So there's of course, Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, more evangelical Roman Catholics, and a little bit of everything in between. So it's a great cross section of evangelicalism, and we all come together and present on a variety of different topics. You can kind of think of like it's basically Comic-Con for theology nerds.
Nice.
We just gather together.
Do you
and talk
dress
about,
up?
I wish
you were Moses,
weren't
you?
Exactly. Yeah, I got the beard
amazing.
and everything. So no, but yeah, that would make it a lot more fun. But there's a lot of tweed. There's a lot of.
So you dress up as like C.S. Lewis.
That's exactly right. We dress up like C.S. Lewis, no doubt about it. But it's really a great conference, and it's great in a lot of different ways. Not only is it an exchange of scholarship, kind of at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. It's an opportunity for us to share with broader academic community what it is that we are researching and that we're studying and those sorts of things. They divide everybody up by your topic. There's usually a theme for each conference. So this last year, the theme, so it was the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed, the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And so the theme of the conference was essentially on creeds and confessions. And so that kind of spurred an idea for my particular paper. And I wrote on essentially tracing through Baptist confessions the doctrine of the Sabbath or the Lord's Day. Different confessions call it different things. So what is it exactly that Baptists have believed over time, at least in their confessional statements regarding, Sunday, and what is that? Why is it special? So,
Okay.
So yeah.
So that's a little history.
Yeah, so that's kind of in essence what the conference is about, and how the paper came to be. It was mostly you get a better chance of your paper being selected to present if you put it within the topic of the conference.
Sure.
And so not everybody does, but yeah, so it's really interesting. And so you literally stand in a room behind a podium. You've got could be anywhere from 2 people to 50, 100, 200 people. You just never know who's going to show up to your paper, and or how many people. And it sounds more boring than it is, I guess, but you just stand there. You literally just read your paper. Some people are better at that than others. Some people literally just read in a very flat, monotone voice, and they just talk like this, for about 20 minutes.
And then some people act like Tom Hanks.
That's exactly right. Yeah, some people are a lot more
fantastic.
engaging. I've known some people that are a lot smarter than I am that don't even really have a paper in front of them.
Oh.
They just walk in and start talking for 20 minutes.
They just lecture.
Yeah, basically.
Nice.
So this usually about 20, 25 minutes for the presentation, and then usually I have you about 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A. So anybody can ask a question from the audience, and which can get real interesting sometimes. I have a friend who presented a paper, shout out to Todd Chipman, professor of New Testament and Greek at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Chipman was now he's a lot smarter than I am, and not only that, but he is a New Testament guy and a Greek guy, and that's not my area. And so usually I get lost like halfway through the title of his paper, much less the paper itself. But he presented a paper where essentially he's arguing with a very popular commentary in Hebrews on how they kind of mistranslated or misunderstand a particular section of the book of Hebrews. And so he goes up to present his paper, and the author of that commentary is right there on the front row. So
controversy.
This is why I always write on people who are dead.
Perfect.
So I don't have to worry about that. That's right, exactly. But you do get people that will, you're staking out a particular position. They disagree with you. There's back and forth, and so.
Discussion.
So yeah, there's some discussion, follow-up questions, those sorts of things. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And so do you do this every year?
I do it. I don't do it every year. In fact, this was the first year in a couple of years that I went to present a paper. And so, sometimes my paper's not picked. Now, you can still go and just participate and just go and listen to papers. And to be honest with you, that's a lot more fun. But sometimes just the cost and those sorts of things, it's helpful to kind of justify it with, my paper was selected. And so, so I usually, I'll go, if my paper's selected, I definitely go. But there are some years where if paper's not selected and it just doesn't seem like a good time, I won't go. So this coming year, it's going to be in Denver. And then, so I may or may not go to that one, but the next year will be in Washington, D.C. I've never been. And so I'll probably go to that one. So, yeah.
And when do they announce the theme?
So the theme this year, they usually announce it a few years out.
Okay,
so whenever
you have time to research.
You have time to research. And so the theme next year is on apologetics. And then the DC one probably has something to do with politics and religion or something like that is my guess.
They're thinking outside the box there.
I know, exactly. Yeah, something a little different. But yeah, so but again, you don't have to write on the theme. You can really write. You can write on anything. It just sometimes it helps your chances a little bit, if you kind of stick to the script. But yeah.
All right. Do you want to dive into your paper?
Yeah. So the paper itself. So there's two things I'm basically trying to do in this paper. So one, I'm trying to push against the idea that Baptists are not confessional. And so what I mean by that is a lot of people, when they think about Baptists, and sometimes even Baptists themselves, you hear the popular expression, well, as Baptists, we have no creed but the Bible, right? That's a phrase that's kind of kicked around a little bit in Baptist history. And so we're modern Baptists especially, are oftentimes kind of suspicious of creeds and confessions because we are very I would say, allergic to anything that looks like authority. That's anything that looks like that it's authoritative outside of the local church, which makes sense. That is part of what makes Baptist Baptist. However, I would say that historically that has not been the case. From the very beginning of the Baptist movement, Baptists have been a confessional people.
And when is the beginning?
So, well,
oh no,
yeah. So here's the thing. So as with Baptist churches today, where there are two Baptists, there are three opinions, and so it's actually one of the more debated things in Baptist history is when do Baptists start?
Who knew?
And so I'm kind of in the camp that will say that Baptists emerge in the 17th century, so in the 1600s, out of English nonconformity, which basically just means that as the Reformation hits England, Henry VIII and all that kind of good stuff, and the Church of England is formed, eventually you have different groups of people within the Church of England that want to keep on reforming, right? They want to keep on keeping on. And they actually want to purify the English church. They think it's not reformed enough. It's still too Catholic. Too much of one of my favorite phrases for this is too much popery. So not the smell good stuff on the back of your grandmother's toilet,
right,
but, too much Pope stuff, too much Roman Catholic stuff. And so they want to keep on reforming. They want to purify. So this is where Puritans, if you've heard of that term, this is where Puritans come from. And so Baptists emerge out of that movement of different groups that kind of either want to reform or break away from the Church of England. And eventually you have groups, particularly coming out of Congregationalism, Puritan Congregationalism, that eventually become what we see as Baptists today. First in England, but then eventually coming over into the United States, and then eventually into a global movement through the modern missions movement. Andrew Fuller, William Carey, and Adoniram Judson, and others. So I would say that's when Baptists emerge, kind of, again, late 1600s out of British confessionalism. There are others who would say that basically 100 years earlier, Baptists are basically connected to the continental Anabaptists. It's confusing because they sound similar.
They do.
Yeah. And so continental Anabaptism, very similar in that both groups practice believers' baptism. And so sometimes people will say, well, you practice believers' baptism, therefore you are the same. But there's more to Baptist distinctiveness, I would say, than just the practice of believers' baptism. Anabaptists have a very different understanding of the relationship between church and state, the church's role in society across the board. They've, usually will have a different ecclesiology structure, these sorts of things. So anyway, all that to say, then there's other groups that this is going to sound like it's a joke, but there are other groups, kind of landmarkism, that actually go back and say, well, Baptists go all the way back to, Jesus, like John the Baptist was the first Baptist. Kind of, I'm joking a little bit, but that is kind of how they, Baptist is the primitive, Baptist theology is the primitive church, and we are kind of restoring that original view. So, but there are a lot of differences of opinion. Mine's right, of course, but other people do hold differently, and then there's of course degrees in between. So anyway, all that to say, basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, one, Baptists are confessional historically, and not just Baptists in America, but Baptists across the world. So one of the things my paper does is I look at confessions not just in the English-speaking tradition, but also Baptist confessions from a variety of European Baptist groups, as well as Africa, Asia, and different kind of Baptist communities across the world. And so so I'm trying to show that, number one, that Baptists have historically been confessional, but two, not only have we been confessional, but we have actually believed some things relatively consistently, not uniformly, but relatively consistently over most of our history regarding the Lord's Day, regarding Sunday. And so what I essentially do is go through first the English-speaking tradition, but then even international Baptist traditions try to look at, okay, what have Baptists said about the Lord's Day? And so usually you have most statements within the Baptist confessions will have one of two components or both components. So it'll say something positive about the Lord's Day, and then it'll say things you shouldn't do because it is the Lord's Day. And so most Baptist confessions will either have one of those aspects, usually just the positive one, or they'll have both positive and negative. And so, for instance, you'll have confessions that will say, well, let me give you an example. So the Second London Baptist Confession. So this is what we commonly think of as like the 1689 confession. This is not the earliest, but one of the earliest English Baptist confessions. It has both the positive and the negative aspect to it. So Second London Baptist Confession says, the Sabbath is then kept holy unto the Lord, when men, after due preparing of their hearts and ordering their common affairs aforehand, do not only observe a holy day, a holy rest all day from their own works, words, and thoughts about their worldly employment and recreations, but are also taken up the whole time in public and private exercises of his worship and in the duties of necessity and mercy. So essentially what the Second London Baptist Confession is there is Christians are to, Baptists specifically, are to keep the Lord's Day holy, set apart, but that means more than just go to church for an hour on Sunday morning. It's actually dedicating the whole day to rest and even abstaining. In this case, the language says both from employment, right? So work, obviously, and what it labels worldly amusements. Now, depending on context and those sorts of things, but may depend on what that would mean. But it probably means like, if there were a 17th century equivalent of like travel baseball, that probably wouldn't be a good idea because it's definitely not what I would call restful or conducive to worship. And so there's some debate there on what exactly that phrase means. But so again, you see the positive and the negative prescriptions. And that's fairly consistent early on amongst English Baptist confessions. As you get more modern, particularly as we get into the 20th century, one of the things you start seeing is that the negative prescriptions start falling off. And so a lot of reasons for this. I think none of them I would say are very good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, one of the things that you find is the negative prescriptions start falling off as you get deeper into the 20th century, particularly in the post-war period, and kind of Christianity becomes less of a dominating factor on cultural life, right? And so what I mean by that is essentially the rhythms and patterns of Christianity. So the fact that Christianity sets the calendar even, right? Wanes. It's not, it starts sooner than after the World War I, World War II, but at least in the United States, it starts, sooner than that, but it really kind of hits its stride in the post-war period. And as work and professionalism and industrialism becomes a more and more central part of kind of the American experience, you start seeing things like, so for instance, let me give you a more concrete example. If you're looking in the 1800s in the United States, also maybe even in the early 1900s, it's incredibly common. Again, and this is not just Baptists, this is Protestants across the board. It's incredibly common for basically everything to be shut down on Sunday.
Sure.
Right? Even in larger cities, restaurants aren't open, stores and shops aren't open. You've got to get all your business done on Saturday, these sorts of things. And no one, even non-religious people, right, didn't, really think about it because the culture and society was shaped and mapped around that, right? as Christianity, and that's because of the influence of Christianity in culture, as Christianity moves outside of what I call the norming norm that norms all other norms, right? The thing that sets the rules and sets the standards. Then it's about how can we how do we maximize efficiency, right? How do we squeeze every all the juice out of every day that we can? And why do we have this whole day that just sits around and is not quote unquote productive, And so the Lord's Day and the Sabbath kind of moves out. And then what that does also, I think, is that churches, and again, this is not just Baptists, but because I think Baptists inadvertently fall into this social trend without really thinking about, no, we actually set aside the Lord's Day for a particular reason. Now, Baptists are still primarily going to church on Sunday, but it's like, okay, how fast can we get out of here?
Yeah.
How quick can we be done? I've got to work this afternoon. I've got this, this project we got to work on. And we don't even know how to rest anymore.
Right.
We don't even think about the theological necessity for rest. Whereas our Baptist forefathers and the confessional tradition especially, this was something that was really important and something that it was important enough to write down on paper to say, this is who we are, right? That's, especially for Baptists, that's where all these confessions come from. So if you just look in the English-speaking tradition, you can kind of the family tree. So for a Southern Baptist church today particularly, let's just talk about the Southern Baptist Convention. We have a confessional family tree. You can go all the way back to the First London Baptist Confession, which gives birth eventually to the Second London Baptist Confession, and then that's adopted in the United States. You have kind of two American confessions, the New Hampshire Confession and the Philadelphia Confession. Both are kind of children of the Second London Baptist Confession. And then when the Baptist Faith and Message, which is the Confession of Faith for the Southern Baptist Convention, when it's first penned in 1925, the authors of that document pull primarily from the New Hampshire Baptist Confession. And then the BF&M, the Baptist Faith and Message, is 1925. It's revised in 63, and it's revised in 2000. And so even just looking at the three Southern Baptist confessions, the 25, the 63, and 2000, you see this change on the Lord's Day, even just in our little neck of the Baptist woods. Because in 1925, you have a very strong statement on the Sabbath, on the Lord's Day, that is both positive and negative. So it says, the Lord's Day is good. It's part of the created order. It's not just for Christians, really. It's for everybody. That's what we mean by it's part of the created order. So you have positive statements about the Lord's Day, but then you also have negative statement about the Lord's Day in the sense that you should not do these things. The work and the worldly amusements. That language is there from the very beginning of the Southern Baptist Convention. In 63, that language doesn't change, which is ironic in a lot of ways because if the 63 confession, you see a lot of loosening in some other areas, a lot more kind of liberalization or modernization, depending on how you want to look at it, but not that. That is an area where that strong Sabbath language is still maintained. It's not till the 2000 BF&M, which again, ironically, is a much more conservative document, much more theologically conservative document, especially compared to the 63, and even compared to the 25, I would say. And yet I would say, so this is Dr. Garner's soapbox, I would say the BF&M 2000 actually liberalizes on the subject of the Lord's Day in that it completely drops the negative prescriptions and basically just makes it a matter of conscience.
Interesting.
Yeah, which we don't do that in any other section, or many other sections of the BF&M. The Baptist theological understanding of the conscience is always very pronounced. But in the sections that were added and tweaked elsewhere in the BF&M 2000, usually it's no, this is what the Bible says, not whatever you feel that's good, that sort of thing. So it's a weird change, which I think has more to do with kind of adapting to culture necessarily than it does kind of confessional fidelity. And I want to say even too, though, that what I want to do is draw. One thing I don't do in the paper is say all Christians must do this. Like you can't watch football on Sunday. You can't play football on Sunday. You can't log on and check your work email on Sunday. Like I'm not doing that. But what I am doing is trying to help us see that we may have overcorrected, right? So we want to avoid the ditch of legalism,
right?
100%, right? Jesus himself, right, said that Sabbath is created for man. Man's not created for the Sabbath. That we humans are not built to merely to follow a set of Sabbath laws. Like that's not what the Lord's Day is for either. But I think we've overcorrected out of that kind of legalism. You can do these 6 things. You can't do these 12 things, right? I think we've overcorrected from that kind of Lord's Day legalism, if that's not a copyrighted phrase, it is now. But we've overcorrected from that Lord's Day legalism into just, it's just another day that I happen to go to church on Sunday morning. And I think we've lost something. I think we've lost a good gift from the Lord in really thinking about the Lord's Day, thinking about rest, thinking about our labor. I mean, I would say that the Lord designed, I don't think it's too far to say that the Lord designed time and space in such a way for humanity to flourish. And one of the ways that he did that is that you work 6 days and you rest on 1, right? Now, work 6 days doesn't always mean like you're clocked into the office, right? We work on the household. We work in a variety of contexts. But at the end of the day, you work 6 days and you rest on 1. And it's okay to say no to some things that culturally and societally we might be pressured to do for the sake of worship and for the sake of rest. And at the end of the day, that's what I hope. This is a very, 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 very small way of helping us kind of correct an overcorrection.
Yeah.
So,
Nice. Well, did you get any questions?
A lot of technical questions because it was a bunch of Baptist history nerds, and so it was like, well, how did this confession relate with this confession and that kind of stuff, And so,
but nothing too controversial.
Nothing too controversial. Which I was glad because I was kind of nervous going into it because it's usually
you have messing with football in the fall.
Exactly. Well, I wasn't worried about that. That was my other idea. So you can when you submit a paper, you can submit 2 topics.
Oh, okay.
And they, either they pick none or they pick 1. And so my other topic would have been a lot more controversial. But this one, I wasn't worried about the controversy of the topic. It was more the other people in the room because like you present your paper and usually there's 4 papers are presented in a session and the other papers were presented by what I call like real people, like adults. And so, so Dr. Jason Dusing, who was my dissertation supervisor, he presented his paper like right after me. So that was nerve-wracking.
No pressure.
And then right after him, Dr. Greg Wills, who's essentially the Baptist history guy at one of the main Baptist history guys at Southern Seminary, probably one of the best living Baptist historians. He presented his paper right after Dr. Dusing, and they're both in the room. And and so it's like the adults are in the room. And so
right. They're going to find my flaws.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So that was honestly, that was pretty nerve-wracking for me. But I think it went really well. We had about 20 or so people in the room and from all different schools and backgrounds. And so, it was good.
No, it's you think you have your doctorate degree and you could think you're done. You don't have to do anything else, especially with history.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't really change.
Yeah.
But you don't. You strive to learn and push yourself. So I think that really makes you a lifetime learner and a great professor.
You have to. And at the end of the day, like that's what I had to learn and what my PhD supervisor had to tell me regularly is that, the doctoral program, but especially the dissertation, like, the big book that you write at the end, the dissertation it's the first thing you do out of the gate. It's not your magnum opus. It's not the end, thankfully, because it was pretty rough. But that's part of scholarship. I think part of Christian scholarship, right? So what's baked into the cake of Christian scholarship, regardless of the field, whether you're history, theology, biblical studies, mathematics, science, literature, regardless of what area of Christian scholarship, if it's Christian scholarship, the what's presupposed there is that humans are finite. We are limited, and we don't know everything. And you, in fact, can't know everything. And when we worship an infinite God, it shouldn't shock us that there are aspects of his creation that we haven't quite wrapped our brains around yet. And so that's the joy of Christian scholarship, and I would say the joy of Christian scholarship here at HLG is that we are not so presumptuous as to think that this thing is done. Right. That we are still willing to ask questions. We are still willing to explore. We are still willing to study, knowing that only the Lord knows everything. And insofar as we know things now, we can always know him and know ourselves better. And we do that through all the various academic disciplines. So,
yeah. Wow. So how many hours did this take you?
This particular paper?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, there's the prep work, there's the reading and the studying, and then the writing. But I don't know. Probably maybe 15, 20 hours all total.
Okay.
So between the reading and the writing and revisions and all that kind of stuff.
Tell your students that. Like,
Sure.
This paper should take you.
This paper should, yes. They all do exactly what I tell them to do. So definitely.
They're such good students.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. Is there anything we missed?
I mean, I think we covered everything. I mean, I think if there's anybody watching this who is perhaps thinking about a vocational calling into academics, I would just say that, and really not just in academic vocation, I would say basically in any vocation, take advantage of these sorts of things like ETS, societies, cohorts, groups of fellow professionals, those that share your vocation, to come together, to brainstorm, to collaborate, to share what you're doing in your field, to make other fields better. I think there's a lot of value in that.
There's a lot of good energy at those conferences.
There is. There's a lot of value in that regardless of your vocation. I think in academics, though, we have because by nature, I mean, let's face it, if you get your PhD, I've not met a normal person who has a PhD. And so we're a special breed. And a lot of times, though there are some extroverts, a lot of times that leads us to we like being, in the basement with a bunch of books, and some paper and a pen and maybe a computer, and so kind of isolation can sometimes feel like our natural habitat. And I think conferences like ETS and other things kind of help us break out of that, and also remind us of the Lord is doing more than just what's in our particular field. So even ETS, it's theology and Bible stuff, but there's a lot of sub things within that. So It's not just Baptist history like what I do. I can go sit in on a paper on New Testament theology. I can go sit in a paper on a different area of history that I've never even studied before. I can go sit in on systematic theology, practical pastoral ministry issues, all sorts of things.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Hey, is there anywhere someone can find your paper if they really want to read it?
I haven't published this paper yet, so it's never done, right? So that's one of the things people don't realize about ETS papers when you present them is, I mean, this is true for some people more so than others, but usually presenting a paper at ETS is a lot like a test drive.
Okay.
So we're testing research, we're test driving an argument. That's one of the reasons the Q&A is so important, because you've been kind of buried in this subject for weeks, months, whatever. You may miss some obvious questions that you didn't kind of answer in your paper. And so the opportunity for feedback, for Q&A is really valuable because you can go back and tweak and adjust some things. And so there's some things that I need to tweak and adjust here before it's probably kind of ready for publication. But, academic journals are a good place for kind of ETS papers to be published. I'm not like the cool kids. I don't have the Substack or the blog or that kind of stuff. So, but you can self-publish and those type of ways. I know a lot of people do that. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Garner. Really appreciate your time and sharing all of your knowledge with us. It's really inspiring to hear how our faculty are contributing to their fields and becoming lifelong learners. I love that. It just shows the quality of our professors at Hannibal-LaGrange.
Definitely.
So we are small, but gosh, we are impressive.
Definitely, no doubt about it. It's one of my favorite things to do on campus is to walk by. If you ever chance to be on campus, those who are listening, and you walk into the library, one of the first things you see when you walk into the main section of the library is you have several shelves dedicated to faculty publications, and those shelves are always growing. Ms. Julie Andreessen, our phenomenal librarian, she's always adding new material, books, articles, research projects, those sorts of things that our faculty are contributing to the base of human knowledge within their particular field. And it's great to see the Lord use our faculty gifts, not just for our good here at HLG, but for the good of others across the country and potentially across the world.
Definitely. Well, listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Scarlet, Blue, and You. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe and share the podcast with fellow alumni and friends of Hannibal-LaGrange University. We look forward to having you with us next time. Until then, stay connected, stay encouraged, and continue celebrating all that God is doing through Hannibal-LaGrange University.